You can't just throw away 30 years of service like it's nothing. The words cut through the stuffy air of the Pine Harbor Community Library's meeting room, where the monthly board meeting had taken an unexpected turn. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward Mary Peterson, the young assistant librarian who had risen to her feet, her voice trembling but determined. At the center of attention sat Martha Jensen, the 68-year-old head librarian, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, thin reading glasses perched on her nose, and a small naval anchor brooch pinned to her modest cardigan. Her weathered hands were folded calmly on the table before her, though the whiteness of her knuckles betrayed her inner turmoil. "I'm sorry, Miss Peterson, but our decision is final," Gerald Thompson, the board chairperson, replied with practiced coldness. "Mrs. Jensen's position is being eliminated effective immediately." The meeting room was lined with bookshelves on 3 walls, with large windows overlooking the harbor on the 4th. Outside, the evening sky had turned a deep blue as fishing boats returned to dock. Inside, under the harsh fluorescent lighting, about 20 community members shifted uncomfortably in their folding chairs. The clock on the wall read 7:42 p.m. Martha remained silent, her posture military straight despite the visible shock in her eyes. She had arrived at the meeting expecting routine budget discussions, not her own dismissal after 17 years of dedicated service to the library. Thompson, a mid-40s businessman new to town, continued shuffling through papers, avoiding eye contact with Martha. "We've prepared a small severance package," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the polished oak table. "We'll need your keys before you leave tonight." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the attendees. An elderly man in the back row stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. Martha's the heart and soul of this library." Thompson rapped his knuckles on the table. "Order, please." This decision was made after careful deliberation by the board. "We're moving in a new direction that requires different leadership." Martha finally spoke, her voice quiet but unwavering. "May I at least know the specific grounds for my termination?" Thompson's patronizing smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say your methods are rather outdated. Libraries today need innovation, not tradition." Martha's eyes narrowed slightly at the insult, the only break in her composed demeanor. She reached up and unconsciously touched the small anchor pin on her cardigan, a gesture not lost on a few of the longtime community members who knew parts of her past. Martha Jensen had never been one to draw attention to herself. At 68, she stood just under 5'4", with silver hair always neatly styled in a practical bun. Her wardrobe consisted primarily of cardigans, modest blouses, and sensible shoes. Today, she wore navy blue slacks and a cream-colored sweater with her ever-present reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. The small naval anchor brooch, her one constant accessory, gleamed subtly under the fluorescent lights. What most Pine Harbor residents didn't know was that beneath Martha's quiet librarian exterior lay a woman who had spent 30 years in naval intelligence, rising to the rank of lieutenant commander before retiring to civilian life. Her fingers, now slightly knotted with arthritis, had once typed classified reports that changed military operations. The reading glasses weren't just for books, they had once helped her decode critical communications during the Persian Gulf War. Martha lived alone in a small cottage 2 blocks from the library, walking to work every day regardless of weather. Her home was modest but meticulously organized, much like the library shelves she had overseen for 17 years. Widowed early, she had no children, but considered the library and its patrons her family. Gerald Thompson, by contrast, had moved to Pine Harbor just 18 months ago from Boston, quickly maneuvering his way onto the library board with promises of revitalization and modernization. His custom-tailored suit and monogrammed cufflinks seemed out of place in the humble library meeting room. At 45, his prematurely silver temples and practiced smile projected an authority he seemed desperate to assert. Flanking Thompson were 3 new board members he had personally recruited: Vanessa Collins, a marketing consultant, Robert Finch, a real estate developer, and Diana Wright, the owner of a new tech startup in town. None had any background in library science or community service. The remaining board members, all longtime Pine Harbor residents, sat uncomfortably, eyes downcast. "Mrs. Jensen's methods are quaint," Thompson continued, the word dripping with condescension. "But in today's digital landscape, we need someone who understands modern engagement metrics and resource allocation." Someone who can bring this library into the 21st century. Martha's expression remained neutral, though a slight tightening around her eyes betrayed her hurt. Her entire post-military career had been dedicated to this library, expanding its collections, starting community programs for veterans and children, and personally helping thousands of patrons find exactly what they needed. Comment, respect our veterans. If you believe dedicated service, whether in the military or the community, deserves dignity, not dismissal. If I may, Martha said quietly, opening a leather portfolio she'd brought to the meeting, I'd like to address some of these concerns about my supposedly outdated methods. Thompson sighed dramatically, glancing at his watch. We've already made our decision, Mrs. Jensen, but go ahead. 2 minutes. Martha removed several sheets of paper from her portfolio. Our circulation numbers have increased by 17% over the past 3 years. Our community programming attendance is up 32%. Her voice remained steady, professional. We've secured 4 grants totaling $178,000 for our digital archives project and veteran literacy program. Numbers on paper. Thompson dismissed with a wave of his hand. What about innovation? Social media engagement? Modern outreach strategies? Page 6, Martha replied calmly, not missing a beat. Our online presence has grown substantially. We've digitized over 40,000 historical documents from the town archives, making them searchable to researchers worldwide. Thompson's eyes narrowed. He clearly hadn't expected such thorough documentation. That's all very nice, but I've also included letters from community members, Martha continued, her composure never wavering, including several from local teachers praising our educational initiatives. Mrs. Jensen, Thompson cut in sharply, this isn't a performance review. The decision has been made. Your organizational skills were never in question. Mary Peterson, the assistant librarian, stood again. Then what is in question? Martha has done everything this library has ever asked of her, and more. Young lady, Thompson snapped. Your position here isn't exactly secure either. I suggest you remember that. Mary paled but remained standing. An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the audience. Martha gently touched Mary's arm. It's all right, she said quietly. Please, sit down. No, it's not all right, called an elderly man from the back row. This is Harold Wilson, Martha. I'm a Vietnam vet, and I remember how you helped me research my benefits when the VA gave me the runaround. You've helped dozens of us vets. Thompson rolled his eyes. This isn't the American Legion, Mr. Wilson. We're discussing professional qualifications, not charity work. The word charity caused Martha's jaw to tighten slightly. My work with veterans isn't charity, Mr. Thompson. It's professional service to those who served our country. In fact, my experience cataloging naval intelligence archives gave me unique skills for organizing historical documents. This isn't some military ship, Mrs. Jensen, Thompson said dismissively. Libraries today need innovation, not rigid military thinking. A few gasps came from longtime residents who knew fragments of Martha's background. I believe my 30 years in naval intelligence actually taught me quite a bit about adapting to changing information technologies, Martha replied, a hint of steel entering her voice for the first time. From analog to digital, from classified systems to naval what? Thompson interrupted with a condescending laugh. Playing Battleship in the children's section doesn't make you a naval expert, Mrs. Jensen. The room fell completely silent. Even Thompson's own board recruits looked uncomfortable now. Martha's face remained impassive, but those who knew her well could see the hurt flash briefly in her eyes. She carefully placed her documents back in her portfolio. I see, she said quietly. If you've made your decision, then I won't waste any more of the board's time. Thompson smiled thinly, victory evident in his expression. Excellent. If you'll just hand over your keys. He was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Several vehicles had pulled up in front of the library, their headlights visible through the windows. Heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the meeting room. The meeting room door swung open with deliberate force. Standing in the doorway was a tall, imposing figure in a crisp navy dress uniform adorned with gold shoulder boards bearing 4 stars. His chest displayed rows of ribbons and medals that told a story of decades of distinguished service. Behind him stood 6 naval officers in formal attire, their faces professionally neutral but watchful. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the clicking of Thompson's expensive pen against the table ceased abruptly. Lieutenant Commander Martha Jensen, the man said, his deep voice carrying easily across the room. "Permission to enter your library, ma'am?" Martha's composure, which had remained intact through Thompson's dismissal, finally cracked. Her eyes widened in recognition. She stood ramrod straight, shoulders back, a posture that suddenly seemed completely natural, and offered a crisp salute that belied her age. "Permission granted, Admiral Harrison," she replied, her voice steady once more. Admiral James Harrison, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, returned the salute with perfect precision before stepping into the room. The officers behind him filed in, taking positions along the wall. Two of them carried leather portfolios stamped with official Navy insignia. "At ease, Lieutenant Commander," the Admiral said, his tone softening slightly as he approached Martha. "It's been too long." Thompson cleared his throat nervously. "Excuse me, but we're in the middle of a board meeting. You can't just—" "I am Admiral James Harrison, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, United States Navy," the Admiral interrupted, not bothering to look at Thompson. "And I believe you were just discussing the termination of one of the most decorated intelligence officers in naval history." He turned to Martha with genuine respect in his eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Jensen served 30 years in naval intelligence, Mr. Thompson," Gerald supplied weakly. "Gerald Thompson." "Mr. Thompson," the Admiral continued. "Lieutenant Commander Jensen's work during Operation Desert Storm saved the lives of over 300 sailors and Marines. Her intelligence assessments were so precise that they changed how we conduct operations to this day." One of the officers stepped forward, opening his portfolio. "Lieutenant Commander Martha Ellen Jensen, Naval Intelligence, 1972 to 2002. Recipient of the Navy Cross, 2 Bronze Stars, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, and the Presidential Unit Citation." He laid an official-looking document on the table. "The Navy Cross." Mary Peterson whispered in awe. "The second highest decoration awarded for valor in combat." Admiral Harrison nodded. "Most of Lieutenant Commander Jensen's operations remain classified, even today. That's why you won't find her name on public memorial walls or in history books. But every senior naval officer knows of her work." Another officer approached with additional documents. "These are the unclassified portions of Lieutenant Commander Jensen's service record. In 1991, she personally decoded communications that revealed the location of 3 minefields in the Persian Gulf, allowing us to clear paths for humanitarian aid." Thompson had gone pale. We had no idea." "That was rather the point, Mr. Thompson," Admiral Harrison said drily. "Naval intelligence officers don't advertise their achievements." The Admiral pulled a chair beside Martha and sat down, signaling her to do the same. "When I received word this afternoon about what was happening at this board meeting, I was in Washington for a Joint Chiefs briefing. I had my aide clear my schedule immediately." Thompson looked confused. "But how did you even know about this meeting?" From the back of the room, Harold Wilson stood up again. "That would be me, sir. I served under Admiral Harrison in '85. When I heard what was happening to Martha, I made a call." Admiral Harrison nodded to Harold. "Thank you, Chief Petty Officer Wilson. Once a shipmate, always a shipmate." The Admiral turned to the board, his expression hardening. "Now, perhaps someone would care to explain to me why one of the most dedicated intelligence officers I've ever worked with is being unceremoniously dismissed from a position she has held with distinction for 17 years? The room remained silent. Lieutenant Commander Jensen transitioned from protecting national security to preserving community knowledge. Admiral Harrison continued. "From my understanding, she's applied the same level of excellence to this library that she brought to naval intelligence." He fixed his gaze on Thompson. "In the Navy, Mr. Thompson, we have a saying, ship, shipmate, self. The mission comes first, then your team, then yourself. From what I've observed, Martha has lived by this code her entire life. Can you say the same?" Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly looking much smaller than he had minutes earlier. "Admiral, with all due respect, this is a local library matter. We appreciate Mrs. Lieutenant Commander Jensen's service, but, with all due respect, Mr. Thompson," Admiral Harrison interrupted, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. "When you disrespect one of ours, it becomes a matter for all of us." He stood and addressed the entire room. "Lieutenant Commander Jensen's intelligence work during the Cold War helped track Soviet submarines in ways that fundamentally changed our naval strategy. During Desert Storm, she personally identified communication patterns that revealed Iraqi troop movements before they happened." The Admiral paced slowly in front of the board table. "In 1997, While most of America was watching Titanic in theaters, Martha was working 20-hour days tracking terrorists planning to attack the USS Cole. Her team's work delayed that attack by 3 years, and when it did happen, the preventative measures she put in place saved dozens of lives. Martha sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed forward as decades of classified work was being acknowledged publicly for the first time. "Sir," the female officer standing near the door interjected, "permission to speak." The admiral nodded. "Commander Sarah Reynolds, sir. I served under Lieutenant Commander Jensen during Operation Enduring Freedom. The intelligence frameworks she created are still taught at Annapolis today. When I learned she was running a library in Pine Harbor, I requested this post at the naval station up the coast specifically to be near her. Many of us did." Several board members exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the unassuming librarian they thought they knew. One of the older board members, a woman named Helen Parker, cleared her throat. "Admiral, if I may, I've been on this board for 12 years. I had no idea about Martha's full background, though I suspected military service. But I never supported this termination. In fact," she slid a folder toward the admiral. "This is a copy of yesterday's email from our board secretary to Naval Personnel Command. When Thompson pushed this through, several of us were concerned enough to reach out. We didn't expect this level of response." Admiral Harrison nodded to Helen. "The Navy takes care of its own, ma'am. Always." Thompson finally found his voice again. "If I had known about Mrs. Jensen's background, obviously this misunderstanding wouldn't have happened. But you can't expect. That's precisely the problem, Mr. Thompson," the admiral cut in sharply. "You judged her without knowing her. You assumed that because she quietly went about her work without fanfare, she must be ineffective or outdated." He turned to address the entire board. "Lieutenant Commander Jensen has always put service before self. After 30 years protecting this nation's security, she could have taken any number of lucrative consulting positions. Instead, she chose to serve this community, applying the same dedication and excellence here that she brought to naval intelligence." Martha finally spoke. "Admiral, while I appreciate your support, I don't want special treatment." "This isn't special treatment, Lieutenant Commander," Harrison replied firmly. "This is correcting an injustice." He turned back to the board. "I am formally requesting that this board immediately reconsider its decision. Furthermore, I am informing you that until this matter is properly resolved, I am declaring a temporary stand-down of board proceedings." One of the naval officers stepped forward with another document. "This is a letter from the Secretary of the Navy acknowledging Pine Harbor Library's historical significance as a repository of naval history for this region. It also confirms that we are considering the library for designation as an official archive for veterans' historical documents, pending the appropriate leadership." Thompson's face had gone from pale to ashen. We. He looked around at the other board members, finding no allies. "Perhaps we acted hastily. Obviously, we should reconsider in light of this new information." For the first time that evening, Martha's composure finally broke. A single tear tracked down her cheek as she watched her decades of service, both military and civilian, finally being acknowledged. The emergency board vote was unanimous. Martha Jensen would remain as head librarian, with an official apology from the board and a renewed contract. In light of these revelations, Thompson said stiffly, "I believe my position on this board has become untenable. I hereby offer my resignation, effective immediately." Admiral Harrison nodded. "A wise decision, Mr. Thompson. I would suggest, however, that before you leave, you consider attending the library's Veterans History program. You might learn something valuable about judging people on appearance rather than substance." As the meeting adjourned, Communit. While members surrounded Martha, many with tears in their eyes as they finally understood the depth of service this quiet woman had given first to her country, then to their town. Mary Peterson approached Martha with newfound awe. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone about your military career?" Martha smiled gently. "My work in the Navy taught me that true service doesn't seek recognition. The most important work often happens behind the scenes, whether it's intelligence gathering or helping a child find the right book." 6 months later, the Pine Harbor Library had been officially designated as a regional Veterans Archive Center. Martha had established a new Veterans Outreach program that brought together former service members from all branches to share their stories with the community. Thompson, to everyone's surprise, had become a regular volunteer, helping digitize veterans' records. The humbling experience had changed him visibly. I've learned more about leadership from working with Martha than in 20 years of corporate life, he confided to Admiral Harrison during the Admiral's quarterly visit. The library now displayed a small, tasteful plaque acknowledging Martha's naval service, placed there not at her request, but at the insistence of the community she had served so faithfully in 2 different capacities. On quiet evenings, it wasn't uncommon to find Martha and Admiral Harrison sharing coffee in the library's reading room, surrounded by veterans of all ages who came to listen to their stories and wisdom. The uniform doesn't make the service, Martha often told young visitors. Some battlefields are in far-off countries, while others are in town halls, classrooms, and yes, even libraries. What matters is showing up every day ready to serve something larger than yourself. The Pine Harbor Library had become more than a repository of books. It was now a living testament to the principle that service, in all its forms, deserves recognition and respect. Share this video if you believe in honoring all forms of service, whether in uniform or in your local community.